Fours are self-aware, sensitive, and reserved. They are emotionally honest, creative, and personal, but can also be moody and self-conscious. Yep. No notes, just yep. Hey, what's going on? Welcome to the epilogue of episode 8 of Me and the Quest. Here on my phone, I'm looking on the Enneagram Institute's website. I just pulled up my type description, and I'm going to be going through and talking about what about the type description rings true and what doesn't. If you're new to the Enneagram and you're curious, last week's epilogue, the end of last week's episode, I talked about my favorite resources for someone to start if they've never explored it, all the way up to like my sort of most advanced deep dive book that I really like. Once you've kind of felt like you've done more than just scratch the surface, you've learned your type, you want to kind of go next level. Talk about one of my favorite books for that. So if you are interested in any of those resources, make sure you check out last week's epilogue too. So big reveal. My type that I most identify with is a type 4. Here on the Enneagram Institute websites, they call this type the individualist. I talked last week about that. Richard Rohr's book on the Enneagram is the book that really sealed the deal for me as far as what type I was. And just one of the more freaky experiences of my life when I was reading that chapter, the first few pages of the chapter, just like never had that experience where every sentence line by line just was like, damn it, that's me. Like that is so me. It was just crazy. So what I wanted to do today was just talk about kind of my experience as a 4 and learning about that. And I think, something I really believe strongly about the Enneagram is that it is important to not be fundamentalist about it. And even, most of the teachers that I look up to they really caution against this. And I remember Ian Cron talking about, just kind of being a little bit nervous about how much it had taken off, because it's one of those things where if all you ever do is kind of scratch the surface on it, it can actually almost do, I don't want to say more harm than good, but maybe it can kind of box. You can use it to box yourself in. You can use it to box other people in, and that's not the point at all. I think it's also important to kind of look at it. Like I've heard him, I think it was him, Ian Cron, say one time that basically the Enneagram is like a really good map. It's very detailed. It's really accurate, but it is still just a map, and you don't confuse the map with the real thing. You don't confuse the map with the actual environment, the real 3D world, right? So these types are maps that show us these patterns that we fall into, but it's important to not over-identify with that. And I used this quote last week, but there's this great quote about the Enneagram, which is basically the Enneagram shows you the box that you are living in. Or I got that wrong. Yeah, I got that wrong. Basically, the Enneagram doesn't box you in. It shows you the box you're already living in. And I love that. So I thought what I would do is I'm just going to go through and read some of the Enneagram Institute's descriptions of a type 4, and I'll talk about how true I see that in me, and how true I see that doesn't make any sense. I'm just going to go through and read the Enneagram Institute's description of a 4. I'm not going to read it like all word for word. I'm just going to kind of hit some of the highlights and see what jumps out. And those of you who know me might get a kick out of this because it's pretty spot on. All right, so type 4, they call it the individualist right off the bat. That just makes a lot of sense for me. Always sort of wanted to chart my own path, do my own thing. Very entrepreneurial, very into this idea of this podcast, right? Of like finding what I'm on the planet to do, like my unique purpose, my unique calling, my vocation. Just always been very strong, bent toward that. So the individualist, that really rings true. In Rohr's book, he has each chapter, each type is broken up with the description as the need to be blank. And in his book, the type 4 is the need to be special. And it's true. I'm special. I'm a little special boy. I like to be the unicorn, like to be the only one of my kind. They say that type 4s are the least common Enneagram number in society. And what's really funny about that is that type 4s love that because it like shows that we're kind of unique and we're the special ones. All right. The sensitive introspective type. Sensitive, yes. Introspective, all day, every day. Expressive, yep. Songwriting, making this podcast, right? Dramatic. It's interesting because people don't think of me as dramatic in like a traditional sense. I'm not flamboyantly dramatic. I don't do conflict. I don't do like what you would call like workplace drama or like friendship drama. I don't do that. But I'm emotionally dramatic in kind of how I see my own life. So I not traditionally dramatic or like how we kind of tend to use the word, but I definitely think it applies to me. Self-absorbed. I've talked about that a little bit on the show. Yep. And temperamental. Yep. Again, I don't have a temper. I don't get angry really. But temperamental in the sense of like big mood swings. Yes, for sure. 4s are self-aware, sensitive, and reserved. They are emotionally honest, creative, and personal, but can also be moody and self-conscious. Yep. No notes, just yep. So here in this next sentence is actually where it gets into the part that I've always struggled a little bit with the type 4. This idea, it talks about feeling defective, or a lot of people use the idea of shame. There's a lot of shame and a sense of sort of hopelessly broken or deficient. And I don't have that. Which honestly, a lot of that I attribute to just having a really good household to grow up in, and like being raised to be a fairly secure person. Of course, with my insecurities, like everyone, but fairly secure, fairly positive, like self-worth. And I don't have that that inner sense of like of this sort of ultimate deficiency or brokenness. But here's where I have seen it come out. And this is something I wanted to share for anyone who finds this who's also a 4 and also doesn't relate in the way that I don't to those comments. For me, this idea of like needing to be special, needing to be exceptional, unique, fully myself all the time, fully authentic, true to myself, all those kind of things that get associated with 4s. I actually, my sense of like deficiency, if you want to use that word that they were just talking about, actually comes from like, for me, it comes down to like, I am not living into my potential yet, or that I have like all this potential because I'm a special unicorn boy. And like, but like if I'm not fully living into that all the time, then I'm like a failure, and I'm like blowing my one chance to be the ultimate human, right? And I've gotten a lot better at that and giving myself grace. And but it is something I still deal with. The idea of being completely ordinary feels so deeply to me like settling. And like it would be a failure. So that's sort of how I see that sense of like a failure or like a brokenness. And then like the idea of shame, which often gets associated with a 4. For me, that shame really only comes in with like the shame of being normal. It sounds weird, but like if it feels like settling to be too ordinary, to not play into all my strengths and sort of the fullness of who I am, feels dirty and like icky and like I'm failing. So that's kind of my experience, trying to understand my type a little bit. Basic desire to find themselves and their significance. I mean, yeah, and that's sort of like this podcast, right? This idea of going on this quest and finding meaning, not just like at the end of the quest, but like that the quest and the search like is the point, and engaging in that process of becoming truer, healthier, more actualized version of myself. Like that's it. Like that's it for me. And it just goes on and on. These descriptions are really long, so I'm not gonna like read it all. One of the big things that for the 4 thing did for me was identifying how much emotions and moods affect me, and trying to identify, like using the metaphor of I'm not the clouds or the blue sky or the storm or any of that. I'm the mountain. I'm the thing that doesn't move. And learning to observe my moods as like, oh, here comes that crappy malaise feeling that I'm going to spend the next day or whatever in this fog. It's probably like, I'm probably not gonna be able to fight it, but at least being able to, that idea that I'm not my mood, I don't have to believe everything that the current mood I'm in is telling me. Huge, life-changing, honestly. I just started looking down at this and I was like, oh man, that's good. There's some good stuff in here. Another big gift that identifying that I was a 4 did for me was it allowed me to really just double down and accept that my strengths are my strengths, and that my artistic bent, my emotional, again, starting with the shortcoming that I just talked about, which is emotional sort of volatility and like being moody and easily getting into that kind of melancholy place and letting that kind of bog me down. That being the downside, the plus side of that being like an emotional depth and an awareness of my emotions and an ability to express my emotions. Being able to name that with the Enneagram has helped me embrace my role as an artist, as a songwriter, as a storyteller, doing things like this. And also like in friendships too, like to be the person who sort of goes first in emotional vulnerability and allows other people that opportunity to express themselves in a safe place. Those are things that I've learned as a 4 are a superpower for me. And I feel like as I've identified that in myself through the Enneagram, it's allowed me to really play to those strengths. And it's the goal here, right, is not just to make my life better, which it has, but it makes me a better friend, a better spouse, a better family member, and a better artist when I'm aware of that. All right, I'll be honest, it's starting to get pretty darn cold out here. I can't really feel any of my toes. That's a little taste of sort of my take on what it's been like to learn that I'm an Enneagram 4. I think the learning about my emotional movements and learning to identify not with the passing moods and kind of that I'm the thing having the moods, but the moods are not ultimate reality. They're not truth. And so that's been huge. Learning to embrace my role as a out of the box thinker, as an artist, and acknowledge, like for me, a big breakthrough for me was acknowledging that most of the things that have most changed my life are works of art, books, podcasts, music, thinkers, great intellects, great communicators, and friends, people who are willing to have conversations with me, to be vulnerable with me. These are all things that I've learned are my strengths, to make those kinds of things, to be that friend to someone, and that I should just embrace that, and rather than try to change it, embrace it and have that be what I bring to the world. So, the Enneagram, there's nine types. Then there's, it goes really deep. There's different kind of versions of the type, wings, subtypes. One of the things I love about the Enneagram so much is that, because it's so, there's all this fluidity to it. There's all this movement in it. So you can kind of evaluate, this is probably what's going to happen when you're stressed. This is probably what's going to happen when you're in a secure, safe kind of place. This is how you're going to act when you're unhealthy. This is how you're going to act as you get healthier and healthier. This is sort of a goal to work toward. I love all the movement within it. It's not, most personality typing things are very static and sort of box you in and box other people that you know in. And the Enneagram has all this movement and life to it, and it gives you a clear path forward on what to work on. So it's what I love about it. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for being a part of this thing. A few more episodes left in season 1. We'll see you next week for episode 9.